This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube, and today we're going to do a UFO video where we're going to try and bring some light onto some UFO prophecies that have been made in recent times. And we have Casey with us today, who is a UFO blogger, researcher. He knows all the players in the UFO world better than me, and he's going to specifically talk about some of these UFO prophets, and we'll put up a few of the clips of prophecies that have actually been made. So, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on.
Do you want to talk first of all about your research and who you are, just so people know you're not just pulling this out of nowhere. You're actually quite an expert in this field.
Yeah, so um 20 plus years probably researching this, I would put it thereabouts. Blogging on it. I've done some other content, like either being invited to a radio show or something like that, and trying to bring people up to speed. The blog I did was more about um, what's going to happen if there is a major announcement and all these people who aren't paying attention. How did they get there? um, those of us who are keeping up with it, we'll be right in stream with it, right? We'll understand everything that's going on. But if you took someone who hasn't followed any of this, how are they going to get connected? How are they going to go from A to B when they haven't even started on trying to understand who the major players are? Who are these people? So that's kind of why I did the blog, was just so that somebody could read it and be caught up really quick. It wasn't a super long blog either. It was just enough to catch people up. And even then, I wrote that 2 or 3 years ago, and I even read back on it now, and it's so out of date. But even for someone new to the topic, they would be able to grab onto it and kind of catch up. So, but my focus is heavily on the prophets, right? The people who make a claim, and we're very short-minded. In ufology, especially those of us who watch this, and I've heard people call us UFO fans. If you're a fan of the UFO topic, we're short-minded, right? We take something in and then we move on to the next headline next week. So, and then these prophets come out with a new prophecy, and no one goes back to say, "Well, wait a second, you said this 2 or 3 weeks ago or 2 or 3 months ago." So my focus is on that, capturing those moments when these people say something, and then just following it out. Did any of it occur? Did some of it occur? Did they amend their prophecy? Like, what happened to it? Where did it end up? So,
Yeah, and a lot of it, honestly, I am still interested in it, but we keep hearing so much in recent months and years about something's right about to happen or something big is going to be disclosed. Then we don't really see too much actually tangible. It's just little bits dropped here and there. So at some point, you just kind of get sick of being disappointed.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what got me to connecting with you on it. You and I have been having discussions about it because we're starting to see more and more, right? The prophecies are definitely trending up. And not everyone pins themselves to a date. And we're starting to see a lot of dates be pinned to things. So that's interesting. Instead of just a wide statement of this may happen, or next year this may happen, or you would hear Danny Sheehan talk about whistleblowers, and he would be very generalized, and oh, well, they're going to be coming forward, and but he would be very careful about not giving a date and things like that. So or at least to my knowledge, I'm not a know-it-all. I've not watched every single piece of content, but I watch a lot, and especially if you try to keep up with something Danny Sheehan says, there's a lot going on when he talks. So a lot of content. But yeah, well, I think we have some good points we could touch on today where we could kind of give people some what are the prophecies that are out there? Have any of them gone past due? Are any of them pending? What's coming up? And I think some good things will come of it. So
Well, one of the new ones, and I wasn't really that familiar with this guy until you pointed him out to me, but he just did an interview on the Sean Ryan's show, which we can show the clip of. Christopher, what's his name again? Bledsoe.
Yeah, Chris Bledsoe. Yeah.
And well, I guess let's put the clip up here and see what he had to say about it. What and who is he? Just while I'm finding this clip.
So, he's a Tar Heel. He's from the state of North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina. He lives out around the Fayetteville area, I believe. And I believe the name of his book is UFO of God. And he essentially had some medical issues going on. He went out, was meditating or praying or whatever you would have you one night, and had some loss in time. Ended up waking up and had an experience where he believes these beings healed him. I believe he had Crohn's disease, if I'm not mistaken. Um, they healed him, and that was, I think, somewhere around late 2008 ish to 2012 timeframe. I get kind of mixed up on him back and forth with some of his stories because there's enlightenment periods where he goes through where they start communicating with him, but he it may have been 0809 whenever his business was going into some troubles, and then thereafter he had this happen. um, but anyways, that's what happened. And these beings, apparently he puts them on Instagram on his page. You can go follow him there or on X. And these orbs show up on his property a lot out in Eastern North Carolina. So he has a lot of people coming out there to see these. But there's also a lady in white that talks to him and gives him prophecies, and that's what he's talking about on the Sean Ryan show.
All right, so let's just do a clip of it here.
But these astronomers run it through the machines, and it comes out that star is going to come up on the horizon in Easter of 2026. And from that point forward, they started remote viewing the state government did, and now you hear it all over TV. 2026, that's the big date. 2027, that year, something's going to happen. Armageddon, you hear it all over. You hear it on TV. If you study, like I've heard even, well, I won't say names, but
Please do.
mention that day.
Yeah, he
A
goes,
lot of people have.
Yeah.
Easter 2026.
Well, the year.
Lou Elizondo has mentioned that too, but
yeah.
vaguely.
I don't know. I just so he goes on to say that it is related to Christ, the return of Christ. He does divulge that. I think if you go on through the clip there, it may be a few more minutes past that. So it took, up until now, and he says that's the first time he's ever talked about that is on the Sean Ryan show. Now he's been talking about a 2026 enlightenment or something big coming. He says there's going to be a conflict between, or this lady that visits him, this spiritual being tells him there's going to be a conflict between Israel and Iran. People take that as a prophecy. I'm like, that goes on all the time. I don't know how you call that a prophecy because they were just trading missiles just last year. So, I don't, anytime you say there's going to be a conflict in the Middle East and you're trying to call that a prophecy, I'm just like, yeah, that happens like
Has
every.
that ever stopped since the beginning of time, actually, Middle East conflicts?
I mean, so it's pretty easy to nail down that probably there's going to be some stuff going down in the Middle East in 2026. But um, he went further on Sean Ryan to put that to the second coming of Christ. So now instead of this being more ufology and you know hardened crafts in the sky that can come down and we can put our hands on them, and there's extraterrestrial beings and everything. Now it's taken a very spiritual turn with his story. So I'm wondering how well the UFO community stays attached to him from here on out, because there's a lot of people that they're not they don't believe in that faith. Maybe they're Muslim, maybe they're um, Jewish or some other faith, and they don't believe in that faith of a second coming of Christ. And so, how many people will start detaching from the Bledsoe story because it's just taken a turn more into the spiritual than ufology? So,
Yeah, and he did say something here too that you wanted me to show quickly.
And something terrestrial, here has got to end. Everybody's going to awaken to a truth between now and 2026.
He is distinguishing the
So there you go. There you go. He says it again there, 2026, and
So
that was a
that
previous
video,
podcast.
yeah, that video was before the Sean Ryan show. So he had always been kind of very generalized about 2026, and he seems to be narrowing in now on his most recent Sean Ryan show. Uh, that where he said it would now be Easter 2026. So he's kind of narrowing in now on a date. But I think some people are definitely if you watch and follow on X, a lot of people are really turning the dial up on wanting people like Jake Barber and those with Skywatcher, well then go out there, sit with Chris, and try to get actual proof. These orbs don't seem to be that high in the sky, so go up there, let's capture, see what the phenomena is. But I don't, I've not heard anything of that. I just hear a lot of grumbles of that from the UFO community of saying, let's get some people out there then, and let's try to get actual data instead of these videos that always happen at night. They're always on his property. Can he summon them somewhere else? Away from a government facility, right near Chris's house, his Pope Airfield. Pope Airfield is where Jake Barber was stationed. And Jake Barber, for those that don't know, he's the one that has come out recently as the egg retriever helicopter pilot. So let's get him away from government facilities. Let's get him out in the middle of somewhere where we can actually do a summoning and get hardened proof. And so that's where this ramping up is going to happen. I think now that he's stepped out more, there's going to be people really wanting him to show some more evidence of this. So
Yeah, because it seems rather than actual evidence, they've just brought on more and more people talking about him. So it just seems like the talk never ends about that guy. One interesting thing, though, one of my old MMA coaches who is in the Canadian military searched up like because you know how they're claiming he's some martial arts expert. Apparently, there's some question on what actual belt he holds to for whatever that's worth.
oh,
But because they're claiming like he's some Superman in jujitsu, but
mm,
but apparently the jujitsu community is questioning that.
oh,
But he did an interview with Ross Coulthart, and there was a clip from this podcast with Ross Coulthart that you wanted me to put up too.
yeah,
So I'll put that up. Coulthart again. He seems to be making a lot out of that Jake Barber story, and it didn't seem to me that it got as much mainstream publicity or interest as Gresh got at all.
yeah.
But they're pushing it as if it did. But let's hear this clip here.
wow.
I think very early in 2025, all hell is going to break loose. Watch.
You heard
this.
that here first, folks. I mean, to say all hell's going to break loose in early 2025, you don't get a lot of wiggle room on that one, Ross.
Nope.
By March of 2025, I'm going to be holding you accountable saying,
Do it.
okay,
Yeah.
you said, let's hear it.
Yeah.
I would just say, in addition to everything Ross just said, these are the things that are moving through the system. There are those kind of things that just move through and can move this ball forward. But I just want to remind everybody, nothing has changed about the usual wild cards, any of which could change everything.
So we won't get into the full podcast there, but there you go. He's saying by March 2025. So we're February 6th now.
Yeah, and I mean, here again, it's what is your definition of all hell breaking loose? So I guess it's to each their own, right? But is all hell breaking loose Jake and that story? To your point, what you just said, no one covered it. You can't be all hell breaking loose when I went and Googled Jake Barber, egg UFO, and I got News Nation, of course, and I think one other outlet that I'd never even heard of. So no one covered it. It did not. So you are not going to break hell loose when no one covers something. So, and I would venture people outside of ufology, you go talk to them and tell them, hey, did you hear about an egg UFO or Jake Barber? And they're just going to blankly look at you. So I put it on my Facebook and it got 0 thumbs up or anything. Like I don't even think people paid attention to it, because it's another video, right? I mean, we don't know what that egg was. For all we know, it was a piece off of an airplane that was being tested, and it was a highly sensitive airplane being tested, and a piece broke off of it, and it happened to look like an egg from top down view. I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that, but I'm just saying when you give this to outsiders, they don't know what to make of it, right? So, um,
And
if
then
you
the
ask,
other factor of that too is they went into the whole point part at the end where they're claiming that people can actually control how UFOs move without really showing any proof of it. And to be honest,
yeah,
that fully took me out of it.
yeah,
That
the
took me
science,
out of it. Like this is becoming way too hard to believe at this point without
yeah.
showing me more.
And I know this may be a good segue eventually for us to Greer, because that's going to get into the psionics and CE5, which is what you're talking about. But yeah, you definitely are going to lose everybody. You're not going to pull in any new people. And from some people in ufology like yourself, you're going to actually lose some people because they just don't understand that. That has been something that through the years in my research, I've heard several people talk about craft that have no controls. So they're controlled telepathically. Lazar talked about it. Lazar said when he climbed up in one of these things, there was no controls. There was a guy who gave his account of seeing a craft. He claims he was shown a craft at Area 51. His name was David Adair. And he said, you can go watch his story. And he said that it was no controls. So this idea of UFOs and them not having controls on the inside of them, it makes you wonder. Okay, are they controlled telepathically if these claims are true? But yeah, I think this one, as far as a prophecy, this one's going to be pending, right? I don't think we're going to give Ross a thumbs up yet and say, yeah, man, all hell is broke loose. He's got some time, like you said, March 2025. He's got a few more weeks to go. We'll see if something happens. So.
Yeah, and I'm not doubting that supposedly I've read that too, that these things don't necessarily have controls, but to say that humans can control them, and Nick Pope did an interview with me too. Well, if they can control them, why are they not bringing them somewhere where they can film them and unequivocally prove us that they are controlling them, and it's not just like some little flash in the sky that could be a drone or
Absolutely.
yeah. So
That'll be where Skywatcher has to go next. The group that Jake has stood up. It will first. I think they're wanting to show us a summoning where it did summon something and they took a picture of an egg in the sky. That will be the grand finale. Is can they get one down and land it and show it on video? And I think then you'll get a lot more people buying in. You'll still have some skeptics because you already have people saying there's been a thing going on X where he's trying to invite people out to come do a viewing with him. Well, when they do the viewing, it's going to be very close to a lot of military sites. So people are already throwing up the red flags like, why do you have to be beside a military site when you do this? When you summon something, you could be radioing over to a military site, hey, send up that funky looking thing we built and let's zip it around. You're so you see what I'm saying? I mean, there's always going to be, even if something shows up, there's going to be people going, how do we know that wasn't ours flown in, some kind of drone or something? So, yeah, it's going to be tough to prove. They're going to have to almost land the egg and have something walk out of it. So,
yeah, and as you said, for like regular people, like the whole drone story got almost no coverage in Canada,
right.
and it was huge here in the US where I am now. But when I would bring it up to people in Canada, they didn't even want to hear about it. They didn't even believe it. And just because of the coverage, they just didn't care. So what you're saying is like if any of this is true, it'll be interesting to see how it's accepted, or if it's just if the people that don't want to believe it, it's going to take like something as far as beings walking out of a craft for them to actually believe it, and even then they might still suspect it's not real.
Yeah, even then.
Because I know my parents personally believe I'm crazy whenever I talk about that. They're like, good for you that it's getting some talk, but we fully don't believe you.
Yeah. No, and I mean, my parents, old fashioned, obviously, but they even claim they see some lights every now and then in the sky that confound them because they're not going across in a linear fashion like a satellite or something, and they'll kind of make moves and stuff, and they sit there and watch it, and they're like, what is that, you know? And it's so high up, you know, it'd be odd to be an airplane or something. So I think you can even grab onto some of the older community with, hey, there are anomalous things in the sky. But you're right, when you go on to that next step of they're anomalous, we can connect with them telepathically, we can bring them down. And even when they tried to have their first episode with Dr. Gary Nolan on there, and asked him what he saw, he even stated, "Hey, I didn't see anything, but I saw one of the psionics off to the side, essentially having like an anxiety attack or something, because apparently he had some kind of connection with the craft calling it in." So, but see what I'm saying? I mean, nothing is really concrete yet with any of that. So,
Yeah, definitely, and I do think that we're going to need more concrete evidence for sure. But the other thing was, I heard Jeremy Corbell say that no one's going to buy Trump's explanation that the drones were FAA, and people like Coulthard are saying that too. Nobody's buying it. Actually, most people were just ready to come to listen to any explanation and accept it because they were sick of hearing it. And my parents, they sent me the Canadian newspaper article that said what these were, which in Canada, the news basically was Trump says the drones were FAA testing. So a lot of people did accept it and didn't question it
oh yeah,
for whatever reason. And I do believe there definitely was some weird stuff going on there, but
yeah.
most people just accepted the official explanation, even though it contradicted what the government was saying when Biden's government was in charge, that it was nothing unusual and this was all just like hobbyist drones.
Yeah, or they claim they couldn't even identify some of them. You know, the FAA and FBI. I mean, some of them testified in front of Congress and said we don't know what they are. So yeah, that there will be some still connected to that. Coltart claims that in that video on earlier from the one you showed, that would this was a kickoff to the all hell breaking loose, is the drone situation. He tells Bryce that we're going to look back and say that the 2024 kickoff of drones was um, the beginning, right, of the all hell breaking loose quote that he said. So I guess we'll see.
And the one point where I start to get lost by Ross is where I admit that the drone things are probably still happening, the incursions over military bases, just like they always have. But he always tries to insist that it's still happening in the same frequency over New Jersey. When I've talked to so many people that live there that say no, it's died down, and while it might be happening here and there, like it's not like people are coming out with new videos every day like they were in December. So I really do think it has died down to
Oh,
some point. Whatever was happening, it seems like mission accomplished overall.
yeah, and one thing, and I know he's not a big fan of ufology, but if you know the name Mick West, um, I talked to Mick a lot on X. Only from I think he's an important piece of ufology, because if we can convince Mick, we're good to go, right? Because Mick is going to look at things as a debunker. He's going to look at things, the pictures in the sky, the videos, things like that, and really try to discredit anything and everything. I don't agree with everything Mick says. I think sometimes he goes over the line, but a lot of the stuff he does is accurate. He just recently debunked one of the Bledsoe videos. Bledsoe had an orb going across the moon, and he correlated it perfectly with the passing of the International Space Station, and showed them. I mean, he pulls up the detail he puts into it. You know, I'm a believer in this stuff. I actually think something's going on, but you have to give the guy credit that he's going in, he's trying to build systems to show people, look, this is actually what it is. But with the drones, a lot of that too, he's asking for date, timestamps, so he can show people, look, let's first check the flight radar and let's see if we can figure out if one of these drones was something in the sky. And several of them have been debunked as regular aircraft and things like that. So
Well, there is no doubt to me that the people saying like they're all UFOs. No, it's clearly there was some mystery drones. It's clear there was military drones up there and search and rescue drones, and at various points there was civilian. So it was
yeah,
a
they said
mixture of everything.
Yeah, they said it was FAA research, so we definitely know some of it was government because they said it was research. They've just not come out to tell us what it is. So,
And
um,
some of them did look like the bomb sniffing drones that you could look up on the internet. Some of these ones you could actually look at the two, so there may have been various different activities going on up there at the same time.
absolutely, yeah.
So then we go on to Stephen Greer, who I guess we'll play this clip that you're talking about, but he's made a lot of claims lately, including about a month ago, his 72-hour claim that to me, he was making it seem like disclosure was going to happen in 72 hours and he was going to be the one to release something. I guess his fans are saying that in reality, this was just Ross Coulthart's interview with Jake Barber, which he wasn't very specific about that at all. To me, like, people are correlating it to that, but he certainly didn't make it seem like that. It seemed like it was going to be something coming from him and a lot different. But here, let's play what you wanted us to talk about here.
So to me, early January means before the 15th.
Biden, yeah.
So that could be Biden, and it could be no one will deal with it until sometime after because they'll have to get their sea legs on. I'm heading out tomorrow to go to some meetings with some people who are very close to the incoming president. By the way, to be on the record, I've dealt with any president, left, right, center, in their administration for 30 years. I'm not partisan at all. But if it's the it's the office of the that we
On that one, I mean, he's pretty much saying early January. So what he starts with there is saying the new incoming president is going to have to deal with this. What he's talking about is, and the clip may have been actually a little earlier. That may be my fault. But what he's talking about is in the very start of that, where he's on Fly on the Wall with Carvey and Spade. He is kind of talking about that in there, saying that there's going to be some special operations folks coming forward. But what he's talking about there specifically is after that release. So after the Jake Barber thing, which he doesn't name Jake in that, to your point, he kind of leaves it very bland. But after the Jake Barber release, he's talking about the incoming president. When he says sea legs, he's saying they're going to have to get their sea legs under him because they're going to have to figure out what to do. And a lot of us in the community are wondering if this next step, um, now that the president maybe has a week or two under him and he's got to fully digest some of this stuff, which some would say he already knew it. He's already been a president before. But a lot of people are wondering this is if this is connected to the announcement coming next week, where Representative Anna Paulina Luna said that she has a huge announcement next week that's going to impact the entire nation. And now she's done interviews with people this week. She said that like 2 days ago, and now she's done interviews with people this week saying, you know, she's making it sound like it has something to do with government transparency. So is she being named a UAP czar? Will she be this UAP czar we've been hearing about that Elizondo's been lobbying for? He's been, it sounds like he's been really wanting that job. Is she being named the UAP czar? Is she? I've also heard another theory is that her saying that pretty much some kind of transparency office that maybe does a heavy declassification is going to be stood up and she's going to head it. I don't know. I mean, so where everybody's wondering if, I mean, Greer's doing pretty good in his prophecy so far, according, like you said, to his fan base, because a lot of them will say, well, he told you something big was coming and Jake Barber happened. And then he told you that once the president gets his sea legs under him, that, some big announcement or or executive order would be coming. And now we hear there's going to be a big announcement next week from Anna Paulina Luna. And we all know that she's part of that group with Tim Burchett and some of the others. There may be a couple others thrown in there, representatives. But her and Tim Burchett have been very connected on this stuff and looking into UFOs and UAP. So I think they're the ones that went together on the base down at Eglin Air Force. I think that's where they had the run-in with the base commander there that wouldn't let them talk to the pilots, and there was some scuff up there. So she's been kind of on this. She took the FAA research answer, by the way, on drones. She accepted that. I pushed back on her a little bit. I was like, come on, it's not FAA research. Why are you taking that? So that may have just been her politics taking over since she's a Trump supporter. But, I don't know. But it's an interesting thing to see if Greer, okay, you could say he's 1 for 1 with the thing that came out in early January. Now, will that move on to something in this big announcement with Paulina Luna? So.
Yeah, and supposedly he's also claiming he gave a 350-page report to President Trump. Did he just send in a report? Because it seems like President Trump could just order a briefing from the FBI or CIA. Why, of all people, would President Trump, like, let's face it, he's a fairly random guy. He's just a Stephen Greer is kind of just like he doesn't work for the government or anything. Why would you want a report from him when you could
Yeah.
have it from the horse's mouth?
He claims that he's briefed them all, ever since he's been dealing with this in the 90s. You have to take it with a grain of salt, some of these things that Greer says. And I'm not a Greer hater. I don't hate any of them, to be honest with you, but I am skeptical, right? And I can be skeptical while still liking and following somebody. I like and follow Bledsoe, but I'm skeptical. I like and follow Greer, but I'm skeptical. Why am I skeptical? He used to say he briefed CIA Director Woolsey, and he still says that to this day. But then I've also heard him say that it was more of just a chance run-in that he had at a banquet dinner with CIA Director Woolsey. So um, briefing him and then or rubbing elbows with him at a dinner, I mean, obviously two different things. So when he says he's briefed a president, or the part I'd heard him say was that he was briefing some of the administration of the incoming president. So it changes from time to time the way he says it. Now Carvey and Spade press him in that podcast, and they say, will you be sitting down in front of President Trump and presenting this stuff to him? And Greer would not say yes or no. So he was very cautious about admitting to that or saying that he would be doing that. But yeah, you kind of have to take it a grain of salt when he says he's briefed somebody. To your point, did he just send them some paperwork or mail them something? I can mail anything to the White House right now or their office and say that, hey, I briefed them, but all I did was actually just mail them some stuff, So
And his pictures of non-human intelligence that he's released are questionable, I would say, for someone that claims to have so much contact with them.
yeah,
You would think with
yeah,
all of his
I've
funding, he
seen
could get.
those. I've seen those popping up, and yeah, it's nothing. Yeah, it's definitely nothing concrete. So
And they'll make the excuse that because of the energy that they have, they're just too difficult to capture in any type of photo or video that we would be able to capture, which I don't know, because there has been some alien videos that seem to be a little bit more credible than the stuff that Greer has put out over the years, some of the random stuff that's been captured by security cameras and things. But
yeah, yeah. I don't. I think most of his tribal knowledge and where people follow him closely again is because of him being, and even Barber gave him credit, and it makes me wonder about that dynamic between, the whole community and Greer. Because a lot of them won't say Greer's name. You watch Jesse Michaels' podcast; he never talked about Greer until Jake Barber came along. Elizondo calls him a terrorist. A lot of them are like they treat him like Voldemort. They do not say the name, right? So now all of a sudden they're all saying his name. You could say he's 1 for 1 for the January prophecy, if you will. But where does that lead to? Where will that go to? So I think that's where we'll have to see. But yeah, I don't think he's the big evidence guy, Greer. I think it's just because he came out in the 90s with this stuff. He did a lot of our introduction to ufology, especially myself, was that press club event he did back in, like, I think it was 2000, 2001. And that actually got some media coverage, and that kind of perked a lot of our ears up. So whether we want to agree with Greer or not, a lot of us are interested maybe from initially watching one of his documentaries or watching the press club event. So you have to give him some credit, right?
Yeah, and I was one of the ones that at one point I was like a full supporter of his until it became more and more obvious there's some type of agenda there.
Oh yeah.
And he still definitely does say some things, but to claim that all cattle mutilations are hoaxes and all abductions are hoaxes, like I don't know. If you research from a wider spectrum, it seems that there is some credibility that extraterrestrials are responsible for some of this stuff, at least in some of the cases.
Yeah,
To say a blanket statement where it's all fake, I don't know.
yeah, he got wrapped up with Rick Doty there for a while, right? So Rick Doty was in one of his documentaries, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty sure that Greer had him on, and I think it was like Unacknowledged or one of those. I could be wrong on the one he was on, but Doty is the one that planned a lot of that stuff with him about the fact that they were staging the those events of cattle mutilations and abductions and things like that. That it was actually, like what happened with Paul Benowitz and things like that. If people don't know the Paul Benowitz story, you can go look that up. Where I guess he's just like a normal person like us, and happens to get in the mix of some transmissions from a local military site, and then they end up messing with him, to the point where I believe he took his own life, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think he got tied up with him sometimes. So sometimes you just have to take it with a grain of salt. Some of the stuff Greer says, he definitely has some outlandish claims. I mean, he still says that he was offered $2 billion by Stubblebine. He was high up in the military. I can't remember which branch. I was actually looking at that guy the other day, but he says he offered him 2 billion to walk away. That's an outlandish claim. He claims someone tried to kill him with his bike seat. I guess he was mountain biking or something, and the bike seat malfunctioned, and he had a terrible accident. And he believes that's tied to an assassination. So it could. When you hear these things, I feel you, because I'm like, it makes you want to detach a little bit, because you're like, it's just too much. He's got so much, but at the same time, um, he is right on some things. So, and he's starting to get some more credibility because of the CE5 and the psionic stuff.
Yes, which hopefully we'll see some real evidence of soon. You mentioned Jesse Barber. Lou Elizondo is on the Jesse Barber show, and it was one of the more recent episodes in late 2024, alluding to like some possible event in 2026, 2027, next few years. Then I heard him on his own podcast, I believe, mentioning something that's possible. Then recently, he was on another one, a Canadian one, where he was kind of saying like, well, no one really knows. These kind of prophecies are always out there. You got to take it with a grain of salt. And I think that's when the Canadian guy was asking, does this prophecy have to do with Jeremy Corbell's recent claims of the fake alien invasion in 2027? So what do you make of Lou kind of playing towards this? Something big's going to happen in a few years, and now he's kind of backing off, and he claimed he didn't really know much about this fake alien invasion claimed by Corbell.
Yeah, yeah. And you said Jesse Barber, so I got confused because
Oh,
it's
sorry,
Jesse Michaels.
Jesse Michaels,
Jesse
yeah.
Michaels, got you. Sorry, but yeah, I don't know. Lou is. I'm very careful with Lou too, because it's so funny. Lou goes against Greer. Greer says Lou is a paid asset of the government, and he's still doing disinformation for them. But it's so funny. They're like the same person. They're just on two different sides. So, and they're very polarizing. Every time they say something about Greer, Jesse Michaels even qualifies it now, because now he's forced to say the name of Greer. He's not saying he who shall not be named anymore. He's saying Greer. When he says Greer, he has to qualify it. You'll notice he'll say, oh, and he's a highly polarizing figure. But I look at that and I go, well, but so is Lou. I think Lou, from where I follow and research in ufology, I think Lou has more people against him than Greer, because they see that he was counterintelligence. They see that, um, it could be possibly something going on there. But normally Lou does not put dates to things, so that would be surprising to see if anything works out there, because there are a few that are in this field that are very careful to not say dates. They're very careful to not say a specific time. You take someone like we've touched on before, Stephen Bassett. Stephen Bassett, there a couple of years ago, was given a date and time all the time. Oh, we're going to have disclosure by the end of the summer. We're going to have disclosure by the end of fall. And it never would happen. But normally Lou is pretty careful, and he doesn't do that.
Yeah, but he definitely said on it was towards the end of his recent podcast with Jesse Michaels, just after his book came out, that something could happen, but he wasn't allowed to say more than that. And
Yeah.
then he further discussed it on another podcast. But now he's kind of backing off from it because Jeremy Corbell is claiming something's going to happen with a fake invasion. And I don't think he wants to have association with
I
claiming that. What
probably
do you think about the whole fake invasion thing?
Yeah, the fake invasion stuff. I mean, every time you pull up one of these comments, you see someone putting Project Bluebeam, right? So everyone's always referencing that. I don't, it's you could kind of understand that if there is a control issue going on across the world and across our country, where the government feels like it needs to gain control of some situation by staging an event. But that one's a little far fetched for me, because it's going to throw off economies, and money talks. We all know that they don't want to throw anything off too bad to where it crashes economies. So staging an event that's going to freak everybody out, why not just tell people about aliens then? It can't be any scarier than staging some event that's going to throw the markets off. So I don't give much. I mean, when I research that and I see them talking about a staged alien event, I know Greer talks about that a lot, and I know Corbell made the statement that in 2027 we're going to be told that there's a craft headed towards us. And but it'll be a lie. Okay, well then that made people say, okay, well if he's saying they're going to tell us a craft is coming in 2027, but it's going to be a lie, then is he agreeing with Greer that they're going to stage some type of extraterrestrial battle, and that's why the Space Force was stood up and all these things? It's going into places where I don't follow it too much until we have whistleblowers step out with documentation. They're willing to go in front of Congress and say, hey, I'm involved in a program that may be staging that. I'm a part of a program that will be doing holograms and things like that to make images appear in the sky, and it's going to freak people out. If that starts happening, I think that'll take it to the next level. Otherwise, I stick to the ones where there's actually credible people. We can argue if they're credible or not, but if they're military and they're coming forward and they're raising their right hand in front of Congress and they're willing to go uh, and take their oath and do that, then I think those are the ones I'm going to pay more attention to right now.
And the thing that turned me off about that Corbell announcement was he made it so dramatic. Are you ready for this? Are you really ready? Do you want the real truth? Now this is the really, really real truth. It's like, what the hell are you doing? You're just like building this up. Like,
That's just his. And something you have to understand about Corbell. Corbell, again, don't hate the guy. I've watched a lot of his contents, gave him a thumbs up on a lot of his podcasts. He does some good things. But he attaches to things, right? He attached to Lear back in the day. I think he even said he slept at John Lear's house. I think his name's John Lear.
yes, he does. I saw the whole podcast on John Lear where he attached how they were good buddies and stuff.
They had a fallout because I guess he was supposed to bring his life out in documentary, and then the family pulled back on that. Um, and then he jumped over to Knapp and he attached to Knapp. And this is all Corbell's words. Corbell said that he was the one that bothered the heck out of Knapp until Knapp finally responded to him, and now he's attached to Knapp, and then he attached to Grush. I think he attaches to some of these things, and eventually they start to lose their luster. And when they lose their luster, and then it's like, okay, what is going to be that next big thing that's going to keep me in there? Because I mean, let's face it, he creates documentaries, he creates content, so he's got to do something to keep interest and hope alive, right? Jesse Michaels puts out great production podcasts. Ross keeps coming out with these whistleblowers and stuff. They all have something that seems to keep their lifeline out there. And so with Jeremy, yeah, you're going to get some fantastical headlines every now and then where it's going to sound amazing, but you know, you have to take it for what it is.
Yeah. I would like the other weird thing about Jeremy that kind of turned me off of his podcast was he had a whole, like, it seemed 5 or 10 minutes of, do you guys not believe I'm Lou Elizondo's friend? I'll call him right now. I'll put him on the screen.
I
It's like,
saw
I'm
that.
watching this for alien news. Are
Yeah.
you this desperate for like confirmation that you're friends? I'll prove it to you guys. Oh, Lou, he'll call me back. It was like, this is pathetic.
Well, you know
And
why he
like,
did that, right? He did that because there was a claim that he and Lou had a dust up after that, where they went in front of Congress, him and Schellenberger and um,
yeah, well, there is a
that's what,
video. No matter what they say, there was some heat over something at that point. I don't doubt
yeah,
that it wasn't serious, but there was. You can't deny from that video that there was some type of issue.
yeah. I think he was wanting to come out and show that all things were cool. But yeah, I hear you. Uh, he definitely has to attach to certain things. Maybe he's wanting to attach to Elizondo a little bit more upcoming, but I don't know. I just Corbell's another one. I'm careful with all of them. Honestly, there's not many of them out there where I will sit and listen to everything and digest and like actually take it to heart all that they're saying. Maybe except someone who is just a true storyteller, like a Richard Dolan or someone like that, who just he doesn't give dates, prophecies. He doesn't do any of that. He's just a walking history book of ufology. Those people I take more to heart. The other ones that are more fantastical in their approach and they want headlines and things like that, you have to really observe, yeah, the whole body of work. So,
And even Lou, I still like him. He's one of my favorites in the industry, and I watch everything he does.
yeah.
But he's clearly doing tours now where he's giving speeches on this, making money. His book is a big seller. Like he's in the business of UFOs now too.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, he put his book out. So immediately when you put a book out, people are going to call you a grifter, right? So now you're making money, whether you like it or not. You put a book out, and I'm not knocking it. Maybe he has to have a way to make his own money, right? If he wants to continue after this, he's got to have an income stream as well. But don't forget, when they're making media and entertainment, we were told this. We were told this by Tom DeLonge when he talked to Joe Rogan back in the day. He said the government came to him and asked him to, because of his pop figure, that they wanted to start disseminating some of this information about UFOs and aliens in a entertainment and media way. Like, how can we do it? And then all of a sudden, TTSA was stood up, and now all of a sudden we have this big documentary coming out sometime this year, Age of Disclosure, and it has all those guys from To the Stars Academy in it. Semivan's in it, Mellon, Elizondo, Putoff, they're all in it. And it makes you wonder if that is part of this plan. And even Jake Barber, one of his messages got put out on X this week where he was telling someone that he was inviting to a viewing. He said, this disclosure effort we're doing is part of an ongoing 7-year plan that we've been doing. Okay, so 7 years. What was 7 years ago? 2017. What was 2017? That was a Tic Tac UFO, and that was who brought the Tic Tac UFO out. It was TTSA. Who told us something like that was coming along. So I mean, it kind of connects if you follow it through. So
yeah, and one of the reasons, and I wish Tom DeLonge would do more, but he doesn't. He seems to only do like interviews about these days, like his bands and stuff, and they'll throw some UFO questions in, and when he'll kind of give hints that he wants to say more about a certain subject, and it'll go over their heads, but he doesn't really do any like deep dive UFO interviews these days. But one of the reasons why I trust him is because he doesn't need money from UFOs. Like that's one of the reasons I trust him more than others. Like he has his money. He doesn't need to like make fake stuff up or make it seem like stuff is going to happen necessarily
yeah,
uh to earn a living. Like it's like someone like Greer, for instance, he like his whole business is UFOs. But yeah, I don't know. I wish we would see more from DeLong, like saying what he knows, because he seems to know a lot.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen recent is he does a podcast. Um, I do not know the title of it because I've not watched it a lot. I can't think of it, but he had Jim Semivan on it. So I think if you just Google search Tom DeLonge, Jim Semivan, YouTube or something, it's some kind of talk that they do. Someone in the comments probably knows. And now they get very spiritual on that. So they and when I say spiritual, maybe not as much spiritual, but they get very like other dimensions and these things being more yeah, I guess spiritual would be a good way of putting it. It's they get away from physical things like a physical being or a physical craft or you know reverse engineering and stuff, and they talk more about the mental aspect of this and how people are mentally engaging these things and other civilizations either. So that's the only thing I've seen from him recent. You're right. He doesn't do a lot.
And that's kind of even different than some of the stuff he's said in the past, where he's been saying talking about the negative aspect of it, and that they might be playing different cultures against each other in various ways. And also, he's talked about crypto terrestrials. So crypto terrestrials aren't really a figment of our mind, from what I understand. But we could do a whole thing on Tom DeLonge's research in the future. But let me play the one other one you wanted me to play. Was of Stephen Bassett, who I've done interviews with. Um, he's a nice guy, so I'm not saying anything bad about him. But let's play what he had to say here.
This summer. What does that mean? It means that all of the 2,000 candidates running for the Congress and the presidency and the governorships and everything else they're running for in this bizarre election that's coming up will have the opportunity to actually get up to speed on this issue. They can go read your books, right, Richard? That will be the first books that they should read. I'll be happy to tell them that. And get up to speed on this issue. They can answer these questions intelligently and have actual information. And so they will look like they know what the hell is going on. And more importantly, the entire American public will have the opportunity to elect people to the House and the Senate and to the presidency and to the governorships who have at least established a position on how they think the world should move and the country should move in the post-disclosure era. And that will be a win for everybody. In other words, the post-disclosure world and the implications of
yeah, I mean, right there, that's 2023. So he's talking about the election coming up, and if they go ahead and bring this out, people will be able to vote in a post-disclosure world. So obviously nothing happened in 2023. But yeah, and I'm with you. I've listened to a lot of Steve Bassett stuff. I'm not against him. But it is what it is. If we're going to continue to do this UFO prophet check-in, I mean, it's a prophecy, right? When you tell people, and if you watch that whole thing there,
I believe he might actually believe that, whether he's right or wrong, though. I do believe that he may himself actually have believed that at the time, whether the prophecy was right or wrong.
Yeah, and even Dolan pushes back on him though. And if you watch that entire episode, he goes, "Oh, you know, I don't know. You're a little bit more optimistic than me," because Dolan tells him, "I don't think anything's going to happen." So, and Dolan was
Yeah.
right. And
He
most of
even
us,
did a podcast with me, though, in December, I think, where he said something could happen very, very soon, as in within December, where they would have like 25 whistleblowers do a testimony before Congress. And obviously that didn't happen either. So
yes, and he's closely attached to that now. So when you hear the thing about the massive amount of whistleblowers, that's because his group, Paradigm Research Group, when you go look them up, they're closely attached, you know, with like the Danny Sheehan stuff, you know, and he's the New Paradigm Institute. So you'll hear him, Bassett, and Sheehan talk a lot about this massive amount of whistleblowers. And I think we were told over the last, pretty much it was right after Grush. When Grush came out, which I think was 2023, if I'm not mistaken, when Grush came out, that's when they said, Sheehan, Bassett, all of them, they were like, you're going to have these 40 plus whistleblowers. I think it was like 40, and they're all going to come out, and they're, and we just never saw anything. We never saw any whistleblowers until just here recent with the 3 or 4 that came forward with the Barber incident. So,
Yeah, and again, that is nothing like the Grush hoopla that came out when
oh,
Grush
no.
came out.
No, Brush actually was in a lot of news when that came out. So
Yeah,
that got major play. So,
and his claim, although he was making some pretty wild claims, they weren't as outlandish. Like even there's some contradictory things with Barber where he's talking about this euphoric experience, and at the same time they're talking about the physical issues that happened due to that experience that supposedly might still be ongoing. So it's like, yes, you had some euphoric experience, but it also caused negative things. So is this negative or positive? Like, to me, there's some contradictory stuff there. Someone's asking about Jason Sands, who I have to admit, I don't know about this guy. I've seen some stuff. Like, what's your opinion on him from your research? I would definitely be more on the side of the fence that this guy makes some stuff up here and there.
yeah. There's some controversy going on with Jason Sands. Obviously, him being in James Fox, and I think you had James Fox on, right? Hannibal. So I mean, you
Yeah,
had
and
him
I
on.
like him. I like
Yeah,
him. He's a nice guy.
I love his stuff, right? And if you're somebody who hates James Fox, we're going to question you because he's so likable, and you could tell he's very emotional about what he does, and I really enjoy that about people. So, and he's a true documentarian, and he's trying to make some money off of it. At least everything is very open about James Fox. He's trying to make a documentary. He's trying to get you to watch it, and he wants to make a buck doing it. So it is what it is. But I think a lot of people gave him a lot of beef for including Jason Sands in the most recent program documentary because some of the stories just go offbeat. And I cannot remember the podcast. I know someone in the chat maybe remembers it, but even Jason Sands gets to talking about some stuff on that podcast, and James Fox is on there with him, and James Fox pretty much tells him, "If you start talking about that, I'm leaving." So he was
Yeah, and
he
I
was
asked him about that, and James Fox, I don't know if it was about that one, but he said he has PTSD, and he explained it as because of some of his mental health issues. He'll
yeah.
go off on tangents sometimes.
Yeah, so I don't know what he was getting ready to start talking about on there. They stopped because obviously James Fox stayed on the podcast, but yeah, it was. I don't know. I mean, Jason Sands has some interesting stories. He seems to be open to. I follow him on X. He makes a lot of comments and gets in a lot of Twitter spaces where I listen to what he says. He seems to be open about coming forward and like if he shared something to the Senate Intelligence Committees or they want to release the file of what he shared, and they were talking about doing that for either Grush or Barber, I can't remember which one. He seemed to be open to that. He said, I'll do the same. I remember him responding to it on X this week saying, hey, if they want to release my stuff as well on what I've shared, I'll ask for them to do that. He seems to be trying to be open. It's just, again, he makes some pretty profound statements, and I don't think they always get followed up with appropriately. If you engage with an alien, I want you to really deep dive. Let's talk about that. Okay, so what happened? What was the interaction? So that was the good thing about the Rogan thing. Yes, I did watch it. Did I watch every single minute? I don't think so because it was a long one, like 2-3 hours. But he did go into his running into this being that had crashed nearby Nellis. I can't remember the name of the mountain that he was stationed on, but the being asked him for help, and Jason pretty much tells him, hey, you can go right up there to Groom Lake and they'll help you. And the being was like, screw that, they're too militaristic up there, I'm not going up there. So I mean, the stories are interesting, but you have to give some of these people some credit, even to Jason Sands. If they can give a DD-214 improve their military history, you have to give them credit, because look at where this has come from. We went from in the 90s and 2000s to uh, a, maybe a drunk Southerner like me out fishing, seeing a UFO, and no one believes me because I'm a drunk Southerner. I'm an idiot, right? That's what I'll get classified as. But we've taken that witness account up to people like Fravor and Graves and Sands and Barber, and now these are like proven military people. Some of them quite proven, like with Fravor being like Top Gun and everything. So these are like you have to definitely give some of these guys some credit and really look at the story. I think it's just with Jason Sands, there seems to be you have to monitor, is he going to start either expanding his story or adding stories as his stock rises. I've often wanted to take all the UFO people and give them a stock symbol and make up a little stock market and show how their stock goes up and down. Because if he's on an upward trend and he feels that, does his story change? Does he add to it? Does he do something with it? And that's I think what's red flagging some people with Jason says, because I think sometimes they feel like he has another story and another story and another story. So
And where he loses it with me, because I've Charles Hall is another guy that I used to believe full out when I first started reading this. But the more I've looked into Charles Hall, the more questions I have. And Jason Sands talks about him like he's speaking the gospel, and to me that is just a red flag for some reason. I just
there you
like
go.
how. But,
Yeah, it's just like anybody else. If I have somebody come to me and they say, "Oh, well, Grant Cameron said this, Grant Cameron said that," isn't that or am I getting the wrong one there? You're Canadian. Who's the Canadian guy up there that says all the wild stuff too? Is it Grant Cameron, or do you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Okay, it's Grant Cameron. You know, I, I'm the same way. I'm like, yeah, but he says some crazy stuff, man, like princesses and portals and all this other stuff, which may to completely be true. But, when someone starts name dropping somebody else that has like even more wild stories and theories, or they say Ron Pendolfi 1,000 times when you hear their story, yeah, I hear you. It makes you tune them out a little bit. So.
Yeah, and I have to say, I like Joe Rogan, but I couldn't make it through the Jason Sands one. And as much as I am a UFO researcher, I couldn't make it through the full 3 hours Jacob Barber Ross Coulthard interview. It was just it didn't. There's too many things about it that just kind of took me out of it. But on the opposite side, I watched Coulthard's interview with Grush like multiple times when that first came out. But that I'm not saying anything either way about Barber, other than I want to see some more concrete stuff before I become more interested in it.
You're
So
you're
hope,
exactly where I am, what you just said is exactly what I'm dealing with. I watched everything 2 years ago, through and through, and maybe twice. Some of this recent stuff, I can't even get all the way through it, man. And I'm a lover. Um, it's I'm like you. I didn't make it through the full Barber thing on Jesse Michaels. I've tried to. I've started it up like 3 times, and I didn't make it through the whole thing. Um, and even the same thing with Jason Sands. Now, you want to go throw up the Lazar podcast with Rogan? I've watched that thing end to end twice, and because there's a lot of substantive information in there. But even then, I don't feel like they really go down the rabbit hole enough with Lazar. Let's talk about S2. I think that's the name of his place that he says where he was at Area 51. Let's talk about that site. Walk me through the door. Let's walk up to the door together. Let's swipe in and let's go through a day out there at that site. Why don't people do that with him? If you're going to tell me you were on site inside a craft, let's just okay. We're driving or we're flying out there. We're on a Janet flight. They fly them out of Vegas, right? And they fly up to Groom Lake. All right, so we're on the plane. The plane lands. Let's get off the plane. Where do we go? And have him walk through a day, and just no one does that. So I think this would be the stuff I would want to see from some of these stories. Let's walk step by step. Jake Barber, you went and got that egg. Let's start at the helicopter. Okay, you're starting the helicopter up. What happens? And let's go from there.
yeah. And by the way, you do have a blog that I put in the comments here that people can check out. Jeff's pointing out that he watched the Bledsoe interview we were talking about earlier with Sean Ryan. He liked it. I only found out about it from you recently, so I'll definitely check it out. It's definitely, you're telling me it's more on the religious side of things,
Yeah.
but we'll check this out. So as we close this up, is there anything you want to wrap up what we've been talking about with? A lot of the fans have enjoyed it, and I hope we're at least keeping it a bit real, because just like Tom DeLong is a band guy, I'm actually a wrestling reporter, so I'm not going to try and hook you guys by making stuff up about UFOs just to try and keep you hooked. I will interview some people that are more out there sometimes, because I'll hear almost anyone out, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with them. But I like that you are very neutral in
Right.
your discussions. You have a blog, but you're not trying to sell us anything on this. You're just a researcher.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm straight up a researcher, and even in that blog, I may have come down hard on Louis on it because at the time, I think right as I was writing that, he had just called Greer a terrorist. So that kind of made me mad because I just thought that was very inflammatory to say. You know, I don't use the word terrorist lightly, so to call someone in ufology a terrorist, I was probably a little angry with him during that. So it is funny when I write these blogs to
Yeah.
remember where I was at that time, and what was going on. But
Greer uses that as ammo against Lou now, so it's almost really a bad thing that he said that, because whenever anyone will bring up, well, Lou's questioning you, oh, well, Lou says I'm a terrorist.
yeah.
So let's get them in the ring to settle this, is what I want to say.
I don't know, Lou. Dr. Greer's got some guns on him, so I don't know. I mean, I know Lou's pretty stacked too, but
Yeah, it'd be a good celebrity boxing match. But yeah, thank you for all your information, and I'll let you close this out with whatever you want to say.
no, I just appreciate the time. And anytime, hopefully, if this, I know that what I was talking about is a lot of things that we all talk about in the comments. So I've been down there in the comments watching your videos, and we all talk back and forth. So a lot of us want to have these conversations. We want to have people maybe be more accountable to the things they say. So hopefully we get the chance to do it again.